Good morning. I welcome you all to this session of my course, Appreciating Linguistics, a Typological Approach. We have had two sessions before where I talked about what is language study or what is linguistics, and then we also discussed what are the possible related things that the linguists they talk about, and who others are also interested to the research related to language, and how the linguists are different from, let's say, a language teacher, an anthropologist or a psychologist, or a communication specialist who deals with linguistics or language research. So let's see now, why should we, and we have also discussed what are the reasons why we should appreciate this discipline. And to appreciate this discipline or appreciating linguistics has a couple of reasons, very solid, and then we must know these things. So the first thing is that it helps an individual truly to understand language as a dynamic system. So all of us, we know that language is a dynamic system. It's ever changing. It doesn't remain stagnant. It has its own changes that happen over the period of time, and we must appreciate and we must recognize the changes of such changes that languages they have, or the human language, or we can say, as I have always been focusing, natural language, right? It also, what it does, besides helping the learner to understand the intricacies that language as a system it involves, it also enlightens, or it also helps a speaker of a particular language to know more about his or her own language. So when you speak a language merely as a speaker, and when you are trying to understand it from a more scientific, technical, or systematic point of view, your attitude for your own language, that also changes. So linguistics helps us in this way too. Besides that, when you know what linguistics is and how it treats language as a system, you develop a kind of appreciation for other languages, and not only the languages but also its varieties. So each language has its own multiple varieties, and sometimes what happens, we get biased, and then we try to emphasize on one particular variety, and we consider it as standard, and we look down upon the other ones. But then that's not true. So as a linguist, you are not supposed to do that. Never be a purist. Never be a language purist. So rather, you should always acknowledge, recognize, and appreciate the different varieties that the languages have, right? So this as a discipline, like linguistics as an academic discipline also helps you to develop appreciation for other languages as well as its varieties. And most importantly, it will help you to get a comprehensive and scientific idea, or and you can actually develop a comprehensive and scientific explanation for certain language phenomena. So just by saying that a particular language doesn't have plural, or when, let's consider languages spoken in India, they don't behave exactly in similar manner always. That is why we have typology. There are different types of languages spoken in Indian subcontinent. Let's compare two languages. Hindi, which is one of the most widely spoken languages of our country. It is also our official language. So what happens, this has a strong or robust gender system, which the rest of the Indian languages do not have. For example, Odia, which is my native language, that's my first language. This doesn't have a gender robust or gender marking which is as robust as Hindi. So when you try to explain why an Odia speaker fails to recognize or fails to speak Hindi, and then sometimes you kind of laugh at a non-Hindi speaker, or you look down upon them, there is a linguistic reason behind it, and we must know why a particular speaker of a language which doesn't have much of the gender marking actually makes mistake when she talks to a native English speaker. So to understand a comprehensive or scientific explanation of any given language phenomenon, linguistics as a discipline is going to help you. Besides that, it also there are more into it, or this language itself is a complex system. Considering it's such a complex system, it leads you to understand one of the most important organ of human body, that is the brain slash mind. So this discipline will also help you to understand how it works, like human mind or human brain, how it works when you try to understand the implications or the issues related to language. So a linguist indirectly can actually help you to understand the human mind slash brain. So these are just a few, just a couple of reasons why you should appreciate linguistics as an academic discipline. But besides that, there are more into it, and gradually we'll get to know more in the upcoming classes. But for the moment, I'll focus on language typology, and why the course has been named as appreciating linguistics or typological approach. So when I say this is a typological approach, I must tell you that why it's important to study linguistics following typology. And before that, I would tell you what typology is. So what is the root word? If I can ask you, when I utter the word typology, so basically you get to know the root word, or the first thing that you must understand, or you must comprehend, is what does the word mean and what typology mean. What is the root word here? The root word is definitely typology. I'll lead you through that, and before that, I would just give you an idea how I'm going to link language types with this particular course, and why I should focus more on types of language, and how typology is going to contribute in a better way to understand linguistics as a discipline. So let's begin with the understanding of linguistics from a typological approach. Up until now, we were primarily talking about the features of language as a system, or what we must know when we are trying to understand linguistics as a discipline. So I'm sure by now you must have understood that study of language is important. And if it is important, you must ask me the question why it is important. And we did discuss a couple of reasons why it is important. And I must ensure you that this is one of the most fundamental and defining features of human being. And why this is one of the most fundamental feature, all of you know that language is the road to understand, like to go through the human mind. So that's the reason why a lot of scholars have been trying to capture its essentials from thousands of years. It's been a while. It's not a new phenomenon. Maybe to study languages from a systematic point of view, or from a let's say from a scientific point of view, or considering it as a system, it has been a little new in that sense. But then there has always been efforts to understand how languages work and what are the essentials of it, which will help us to understand the humans better. Because you remember I told you, the language, like the human beings are the only species on the earth which uses language. And when I say language, I'm talking about natural language. So since we are the only species, so by studying language in a systematic manner, or by studying language in a more comprehensive manner, by understanding its essentials, it's going to help us to understand human beings better. So that is what a linguist does, or that is what linguists in general they do. So what are they trying? They're trying to establish the limits and possibilities of human languages by comparing the structures of a wide range of varieties of languages. So, what's this? The idea here is that we are trying to establish the limits. And if you remember, I just said language is a system. Since it's a system, it must have its own limits and possibilities. And these limits and possibilities, either they are random. One school of thought, like one way you are going to consider it as it's a random thing, and it doesn't really fall in any pattern. It doesn't follow any pattern or any sequence. It's so random that it's difficult for us to predict why a certain linguistic phenomenon behaves in a certain way. The other side of the story is that it definitely has its randomness, but this randomness can be predicted at times. if not fully, but partially. And because it's a system, it has its own limits and it has its own possibilities. That is why we have something called possible languages and probable languages. There are languages which are considered to be possible, and there are languages which we might consider this probably could happen maybe in a few years. So, what the typologists are doing and why we should approach this course from a typological perspective, primarily because of the reason that we are trying to understand the limits and possibilities of this language. And what we are going to do, what the linguists are doing, they are trying to compare the structure. And this structure deals with a wide range of varieties of multiple world's languages, like multiple languages of the world. I must not say multiple words, the world is one. And then it does have many thousands of languages spoken by its people. And as of now, we are aware about roughly, like approximately, there are 6,700 languages spoken by the humans on this planet. So considering we have such a huge sample, we have some 6,700 languages spoken by it, we can surely segregate them into different patterns. We can surely put them in such a way that we can decide on the types. Let's say Germanic languages like English and Norwegian, they are going to be in a different category. And Dravidian languages like Telugu or Tamil or Malayalam or Kannada, that's going to belong to a different type. And on the other hand, we have all these Sino-Tibetan languages, or like the languages spoken in Japan, in Korea, in China. So they belong to a separate language type altogether. So all these kinds of typological work, or when you are trying, and when I said type or typological work, primarily I'm trying to compare the structures of these languages. And one of the most popular, or I can say the easiest way of language comparison is to study their word order. So when I say word order, I'm talking about the default form of a construction in this given language. So we have units like subject, we have object, and then we have verb. So when we are talking about the subject, object, verb, that's not how all languages like they follow the pattern. Let's say when I say I am drinking water, that could be I is the subject, I am drinking, that's the verb, and water is the object. SVO pattern, that's how English, that's how the English speaker, they speak this language. But that doesn't work in Indian way. Most of the Indian languages, they would say it's not SO, it's not SVO, rather they are going to follow the subject and then the object and then the verb pattern. I'll give you the example from Hindi. So Hindi, मैं पानी पी रही हूँ. So when you say मैं, that is the subject, पानी, which is water, which is the object, and पी रही हूँ, that's entirely the predicate, or you can call it verb. And that's a complex verb. If you compare these two, then you would see that these are so complex. So I am drinking, so with just an auxiliary and then the main verb I am drinking, has so many Hindi words here, P, Rahi, and then who. So 2 words over there, they correspond to 3 words over here. So who is the copula here, which is the auxiliary in that sense. So this is going to be a little interesting. Imagine yourself as a linguist, let's say 1,000 years ago. So 1,000 years ago, these SOV, SVO, these ones, this kind of study was not much popular, or people were not, like the researchers were not much interested to understand the structural differences in a scientific way or in a descriptive way. Rather, the focus was on the prescriptive method of grammar studies, and they would just give you, okay, English follows this pattern, and then obviously when the other languages were considered, the patterns would be different. So to compare these patterns that the world's languages have, this would help us to understand the complexity of language in a much better way. That is what the typologists do. So if the question is what is linguistic typology, then you must know that the concern here is that for a typologist who is also a linguist, she would basically do the comparison of the structures of a wide range of varieties of the languages. So there are two words important here. So wide range of varieties. So you are not just focusing on different types of languages, you're also focusing on the different varieties within one language. So one is a bigger set, the other one is the tiny sets within that. So if I say Hindi, so then I have to talk about what are the different varieties of Hindi that I may consider. And if I talk about Indian languages, or for that matter South Asian languages, then I'm going to figure out what are the South Asian languages and which type can I add them in this category. So primarily a linguistic a linguist who is also a typologist is trying to work on multiple samples of world's languages, and accordingly they would come up with some generalization. And the generalization could be structural, it could be functional also. So that is why we have two different kinds of typologists. So we have structuralist typologists who are working on the structure of language, or we can call them generative typologists. Then we also have, or you can call them formal typologists, those who are trying to understand the forms of language or the forms of human language following a typological approach. Then on the other hand, we have researchers or linguists who are working on the functional typology. And functional typology would primarily talk about, or would primarily compare the function of language, or the function of multiple human languages which are used in the discourse. So linguistic typology as a subdiscipline, or as a subset of the bigger term called linguistics, can include two different schools of thought, either the formal generative approach or the functional typological approach. So formal generative approach, or what we call generative typology, is comparatively younger than the functional typology, because this is a, so when you say FGT or formal generative typology, it's primarily the intention is to bridge the gap between the functional school of thought and the formalist school of thought. So these are the things we are going to discuss later, towards the, maybe in the middle of the course, before I give you the assignments and other stuff. But as of now, let's focus on what we expect or what we must know when we are talking about linguistic typology. So to give you a formal definition, or to give you a formal idea about what linguistic typology is, just remember, just for the sake of understanding, or to put it in a more formal space, this is the systematic study and the comparison of language structures. And as I've just mentioned, it's not a very old discipline. It goes back to something like 2.5 centuries. So when the academic research and then the human knowledge has a long history, linguistic typology is not that old if you compare it with the other disciplines like literature or philosophy or sociology for that matter. So this is just 2.5 centuries old, and it started, as I've just mentioned in the slides, it started as early as 1772 with Johann Gottfried Herder to von Schiegel 1808 to Greenberg 1954. So Greenbergian typology, which is primarily the descriptive typology, I would say, Greenberg falls in the category of the descriptive linguists. So Greenberg made it so popular, or his contribution to linguistic typology has been immense. Though it has started as early as 1772 by Johann Gottfried Herder, which went on to von Schiegel in 1888, but primarily for the modern approach to typological study, the credit goes to Greenberg. And the seminal work on linguistic typology or language typology was done primarily in 1954. So by now, I hope you understand that my participants, what I expect, they should be, they should have some basic understanding of linguistics as a discipline. So with some very little linguistics background information, and those who have not really worked on typology before, you are going to be beneficial out of the course, of this course. And when I expect you to know the basics of linguistics, I would like you to be aware about two primary factors for this course. And then you must understand, when I say typology, I expect you to know what are the genealogical affiliations of language and what are the areal affiliations of language. So I'm talking about, when I say genealogical typology, we can draw the tree and then we can find out, okay, if this is Indo-Aryan language, this is Indo-European language, or for that say Indo-Iranian language, there must be some kind of genealogical connection. And then there are other areal affiliations, like let's say South Asian languages. So when I say South Asian languages, here we may not have direct genealogical link with each other, but then we surely have an areal affiliation among languages. So these are the issues I expect you to know before you come for the course. Even you don't know about it, if you are a novice and then you don't have any linguistics information before this, you can still go for some self-reading, some very basic like generic linguistics books are going to be of help to you.